Welcome to another episode of Sports Gumbo with Drew Lasker, and we're still here in the comfort zones of Sacred Stone Studios, of course, with the main man over there, Eric Pierre.
What's up?
And we have a special guest in the house. We finally was able to, we had to pull her in, our correspondent of the show, Yvonne Harris, also co-founder of 21 Media. I'm loving the pink.
Thank you. I love pink. You know, it's my favorite color. I'm surprised you don't have on pink.
I know. I didn't get the memo because both of you guys are sitting there. That you look like you have on salmon. And how would you describe that pink, Yvonne?
Yeah,
this is salmon.
Yeah,
that looks like salmon.
Yours is like almost like a
purplish
turquoise or fuchsia.
Fuchsia. Yeah.
But on camera, it looks more similar.
Yes.
I think than here in person.
Agreed.
But it's good to be here with you guys. Normally, I'm behind.
I know.
The scene, so great
we had to send the army to get her again in front of the camera. I'm sorry. I'll tell my boys not to do that. Knock your door again like that.
Yeah, but no, it's great to have you on here, and obviously you serve even though you're behind the scenes, you serve a purpose behind the scenes of really steering us in the direction, keeping us in touch with all the hot topics that's going on in the sports world. But we want to dive more into as we wrap up the summer here. What do we have coming up?
Well, I think both of you have done a really great job, Eric, especially you lifting your voice and giving voice to topics that are important, and they're sports adjacent or connected to sports, but they're really just important topics to everyone. So thanks for shouting out women, all the great advancements, women in sports, but it's reaching to women in other industries as well. So really appreciate that.
You're welcome. We can't ignore women because I think this year, for the first time, women's sports globally is going to generate $1 billion of revenue according to a study Deloitte did. You can't ignore them anymore.
And it's long overdue.
Yes.
Long overdue. So shout out to all the women.
Yes.
All of the women listeners to this podcast.
Yes,
hopefully there will be more because you really do provide a megaphone. But Drew, I guess specifically like what's on my mind and my heart today as we round into the fall and the month of September. September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and September 10th specifically is the day.
Oh, wow.
The day that we really focus on conversations around suicide prevention, but it also leads me to the topic just more holistically about mental health.
Yeah.
And again, with all the important things you all talk about, sports and mental health and athletes and the spirit of competition, but just all of those different things, how are we making sure that we are focused on the optimal mental health of athletes and how are we supporting them? How are we as parents really supporting our children who are playing sports?
Yeah.
And how are teams, Eric, equipping themselves to support their athletes? So I think we could just have like a very, complex or layered conversation about it, but we just need to start somewhere.
Yeah, and first of all, that's a very good shout. And obviously, I'm more involved on the sports world. And Eric, you have the dynamic of working in both corporate America and then also in the sports world. And Yvonne, you're more tagged on the corporate side. So let's start there because I'd like to see the comparisons, the pros and cons in both industries. Let's start with both of you guys of how you've seen mental health or the support of mental health. We've seen the evolution in the corporate world.
Yeah. Let's see. I've been in the workforce. I mean, if you count my internship since, I guess 96 in high school.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, I know. I just aged myself. Yeah, I'm 44.
in the olden days, as my kids to say.
Right? I remember riding Metro here in downtown from Katy to the Allen Center. Back it was Amrad and Hess before they became Hess. And I think Hess got bought by, was it Chevron or Texaco? One of them. I can't remember right now. So forgive me. I don't live in Houston anymore, so I'm sorry if I offended the oil companies. Mental health was, I guess, my perspective is different. And when I say this, I'm not trying to knock my family, but, I came from a home of 2 Haitian immigrants. Mom came here in 1969, New York. Dad came here in 70. You know, they basically taught us not to show emotion because the world's very cruel. And my parents were people, English was not their first language. You know, society wasn't as patient. In fact, like English was probably not my first language as a kid. I actually heard another language. And then when we went to school, you know, they had told my folks to stop talking to us in native tongue and to talk to us in English. We didn't have the ESL because, you know, I should have been a bilingual kid. And I have some regret of not really working harder to, you know, preserve my parents' languages. They speak 2 languages, you know, French and Creole. You know, so, you know, my parents speak 3. A lot of my family members speak 3. Some will speak 4 or 5. And mental health today, we've come a long way because now I'm not in corporate every day, but I know that there's programs where they support employees, you know, to get therapists, and it's part of your cafeteria plans. Insurance companies today include in some of your PPOs to pay for therapists. That's a far cry from even my last corporate job when I left in December 2015. You didn't want to say that. Not many people willing to say that you were working with therapists. You were seen, you know, as a wuss. I don't want to clean up my language, but there's certain words that if you admitted to having a therapist, it was a problem. You were seen as weak, and you were going to be out the door at your job.
Yeah, but I want to underscore, Eric, where you started. It really started with your upbringing, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that different cultures interface with the topic of mental health very differently. Not all cultures talk freely about going to see someone or
Correct.
You know, going to get help. It could be, I think, what did you say your parents said? They said, you know, you don't show emotion, was what they said.
You don't. Because, like, you know, my dad was on a, you know, was an H-1B visa for a while, and then a green card. You know, my parents weren't naturalized until 1990.
So, yeah, don't show emotion. You know, don't wear your emotions on your sleeve, whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah.
Many of us grew up with that. It definitely, I think, in a lot of communities, until recently, it wasn't condoned that you would go and see a professional. Maybe the response was you go to church, or
you go see your pastor. Yeah.
You go to your house of worship, whatever that looks like for you, and you pray, but you resolve it, right? And I think it's become normalized, and I'm glad that it has. That maybe in certain communities we're more aware of resources and help that can be made available. That when you do enter a tough time or a dark season, that there are other places where you can reach to get that help, to get that support, so that it doesn't seem like your only options are ones that lead you down a path
Correct.
where you're making really drastic decisions that could take you away from your journey here. Which again is the focus of September, and you know, just wanting to make sure that everyone who's human feels supported, even in the darkest of times.
I do want to share, like, for me, I've been working with my therapist weekly for the last 2 years.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. I have no problem saying that. And, you know, part of it was like my business grew a lot, and there was a lot of things that, you know, just came at me all at once that I wasn't, you know, ready for. And I had to be able to get help. And also, you know, working with therapists for me, you know, I've been single for a long time, but working with a therapist, I saw why I wasn't ready to be married. Because some people say, well, Eric, why have you been ever married? The truth is, I wasn't ready to be married. I was a very selfish person. You know, some people know me as a generous person, but there, you know, there's a definitely selfish side. And part of that selfish side has allowed me to be an entrepreneur, a successful one. But some of the things that I do in my business, you can't do in a personal relationship. Particularly, you know, being vulnerable. Because, you know, growing up playing sports, you don't want to be vulnerable to your opponent. If you're vulnerable to your opponent, you're dead.
But are you vulnerable to your teammates? Is that okay?
Yes. But even then, that gets, you know, there has to be a good environment for that. You know, because I'm sure, you know, because, you know, I think at times we struggle with what masculinity looks like. And if you admit certain things, it can be perceived as weakness at times. You know, that's why I commend Dyson Hughes for the video that he put on his social media, most basketball players that I know, whether it's NBA or minor league, you have to be overly cocky about yourself. And for him to show his biggest failure, missing a game-winning three-point shot where he was wide open at the buzzer, and he was willing to show it and make a video about how he was processing it, that takes a lot, because most guys that I know on that team, most players in that team, the other players that I know, even NBA guys, would not show that on their own social media. The last person I can think of that made it public like that was Michael Jordan. He talked about, I failed 23 times, and I failed that many times, which has allowed me to succeed. I can't quite remember the catchphrase, but it takes a lot of courage for someone like Dyson to be vulnerable and to show that clip of him missing what a lot of people probably would say probably was a wide open shot. But I spoke to him and said that he had a lot of courage to take that shot, because in the previous game, he actually didn't take a game-winning shot. And I said, you're our best scorer. You or Nick Fleming have to take that shot. That's what y'all are here for. And if you miss it, if anybody blames you, I'm going to have a problem with them, because that's y'all's role.
Yeah.
Nick hit a game-winning shot. Dassan missed it, but you'll never make the shot that you don't take. And I will gladly, if we're fortunate enough Dassan back next year, I would love to see him take the game-winning shot again. I will live with that. And I hate for some of the other players to hear that, but rather him, I'm not going to name certain guys, so some of the guys think they should take that shot. They shouldn't. That's his job. That's his role. He's built for that. And he took responsibility publicly the way that most of the people on that team would not.
Yeah, I see you oozing with passion with this certain topic. And interestingly enough, I got to watch this whole thing unfold in the background. And I'll say much wider than not just that team, like from any sports team, sports world, that I've never seen that before. I've never seen an athlete, because that's what social media is for, right? Is to show the highlights, right?
Yes,
build yourself up.
It's your personal highlight.
I've never seen anyone post a video like that where they show their lowest moment and let the world see of how they're dealing with that. But before we move over to sports, because I'm interested to kind of deep dive into the difference into this topic in corporate America. But I just want to, Eric, you touched on about how when you were coming up, about what your parents said and how it was kind of frowned upon, specifically with our culture, talking about your feelings or, getting a therapist. Have you guys seen a change in our culture? When I say our culture, I mean the Black community, of being more open, more receptive to receiving therapy or talking more openly about their feelings?
I am happy to say yes. I have seen a change. Yeah. And I know, Drew, you were steering us away from sports, but I think it's in large part due to sports and conversations that we've had to have around mental health and athletes. Yeah. So we'll come back to the story that you were sharing, but I just look at you all as former athletes and then so many other athletes out there. You're on a stage. You're making mistakes that many in corporate America or many entrepreneurs are making, but we're not on a stage with millions or thousands of people watching, right?
You don't have a crowd of 100,000 in a retractable roof stadium watching me do a tax return. Nobody's paying for that. I wish they would, but they're not going to.
But there's this expectation that you have to go out there and you have to be perfect every game. Every situation, every practice, whatever that's like. And to be able to start to have conversations to just say, we are not wired as humans, right, to live to this level of perfection. How do you as athletes, how do you manage your mental health along with how you manage, like there's been so much focus on your physical health and keeping your bodies fine-tuned. But up until recently, we weren't talking about your mental health, which is just as, if not even more important. Yeah. But then, Eric and Drew, you know me, I always just bring it back to, for those of us as parents, right? I'm not an athlete, but I have a child who loves to play sport. Yeah. What is our role in supporting and putting the emphasis on mental health? So I have seen a difference, Drew, in that we're normalizing the conversation. In large part, it's because of sports, but in corporate America, we have employee assistance programs where employees can go and they can get help that they need. there's also more emphasis in the benefits packages on mental health benefits, because those benefits, quite honestly, from a financial perspective, can be very expensive if they're not covered by your medical plan. So you see a lot of corporations that are now negotiating to include those in their benefits offerings.
In my medical plan, I have that for the people that have taken that plan. Now, I don't use it myself because my therapist doesn't accept that, because insurance companies don't necessarily pay on time. So, but I have another way of getting a write-off on that that's legal. I just don't care to get into that right now. But if you have a holding company and reimbursement, but that's another episode. But yeah, I agree with you, Yvonne. It's you talk about black. It's funny you talk about black community. Like the first time I heard about therapy in pro sports was, we were laughing, but I remember we heard that Ernie Els went to a therapist because Tiger Woods was kicking his ass so much. And then he actually referred that therapist to Retief Goosen, because Tiger got in all these golfers' head. They were seeing a sports therapist. Like that's how that's the first time I heard about it in pro sports, when Tiger was he was just mollywopping people. A lot of these young kids don't realize how great he is. I mean, people are impressed with Scotty Scheffler, but Scheffler is not as good as Tiger. And Scotty's an amazing golfer. Like, he is not as good as Tiger. I mean, Scotty's winning by 2-3 shots. Tiger was beating guys in majors by 10 strokes. He won his first tournament by 12. That never happens.
But even from that perspective, like, you're focused on the sport of it. Like, I look at athletes and I think about, even on a professional level, they still have a life that they're contending with.
Yes.
And I'm ashamed that I do not remember the player's name right now off the top of my head, but he played in the playoffs, NBA. He lost his brother in a car accident, and then another brother went to jail.
Oh, Michael Porter
Jr.
Denver Nuggets.
So his brother killed someone else in the DWI.
DWI, yeah.
And this is all a week apart. And his other brother got
in trouble for gambling. It's been banned from the NBA. Jonte Porter was the one that's got caught gambling. Played for the Raptors.
Okay.
Been banned from the league. The other brother, I don't know his name, but the player is Michael Porter Jr.
Okay, so I mixed up the facts a little bit, so apologies for that. Yeah. But when I was hearing all that for the first time, it just weighed heavily on my heart, because he was still expected to go out there and perform and give his all. And I was just like, but how is that humanly possible? And who's supporting him, if it is, with his mental state in that moment to make sure that he is able to go to work? I mean, I just refer to it as going to work, right? We call it playing a game because we're all sitting there and we're watching this game, but for him, it's going to work. So what are teams doing to support athletes during these times, during these moments when life is lifing? But that was really deep. So share with me again, what were the details? Because I mixed it up.
It started off with one of his other brothers who played in the NBA, was betting on himself, and got a life ban.
Okay.
And then literally not even a week later, his other younger brother killed another young lady after being involved in a DWI. He was drunk while driving. Yep. And this was during the NBA playoffs.
Right. It was
and they're trying to go back-to-back titles.
Yeah. So you talk about the pressure.
But didn't a player lose an older brother in a car accident?
I don't remember that.
I'd have to look that up.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
But to answer your question, Yvonne, what a lot of teams are putting in place is they're putting in mental health coaches. So at the pro level and at the university level in the UK, which I coach, when I got the job 3 years ago, they told me about all the resources I had. They said, hey, you have a nutritionist, you have an SSC coach, and you have a mental health coach. And I was like, oh, okay. Didn't think much of it. She come down and she introduced herself to me, and she was like, you can use me as how you see fit. And at the time, I didn't know how to use it because this is new to me. I'm just coming off retirement. And you have to understand as well, I grew up playing in the 90s where, similar to your story, Eric, from an athlete's perspective, you hurt, you get out there and you play. You know what I mean? No matter how you feeling that day, and you don't make any excuse about it and you don't talk about it. So that's the era that I grew up in. And so with this resource, I just went with the flow. I didn't understand until after the year of how important it was to the guys on my team, until she told me how many one-on-ones she had. I didn't know she was doing one-on-ones. I just knew once a week she was meeting with the team for practice and that was it. And she gave me the numbers of the guys she was working with individually. And I was like, wow, these guys really need this. So
Kind of sounds like Ted Lasso.
Yeah. So the next year, I said, I said, I want to use you more. But to answer your question, that is what most teams are doing. They have a collective group meeting with the therapist, and then the players can use them one-on-one. But just real quick, before you guys jump in, because this has been really difficult for me to understand this topic because, like you mentioned, just of how I was ingrained as an athlete. And I was discussing it with my wife, and I had many hamstring injuries during my career. And we were kind of debating about the whole thing. And I was like, I don't understand. And then she was like, when you used to pull your hamstring, could you play? And I was like, no, because it's a muscle injury. It's not something that you can play through. And she was like, think of mental health like a hamstring injury. And that's when the alarm bells went off for me. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, it's muscular, but it's in your brain. So you are incapable of playing. And so ever since I looked at it from that perspective, I see it completely different now.
Yeah. And Yvonne, by the way, the player you're talking about, that was actually Aaron Gordon. His brother did die on June 1st, 2024.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So you were correct. It was Aaron Gordon.
Which, by the way, both of these players that we're talking about play on the same team.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I was mixing families,
and
but they played
and
together.
By the way,
that's nuts.
And both those guys didn't play well in Game 7 at home. When their team blew a 20-point lead, you can't help but wonder with those two key players having those things over their head.
How much that factored in.
Yeah, because Aaron Gordon did not look like himself in Game 7. He had no lift. He's normally very aggressive, and I can't blame him.
Yeah, I can't either.
Yeah.
I can't either.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess the message here is just that, the resources are becoming more available. The conversation is normalizing, and maybe with your microphones as well, you can just have prompts throughout the seasons where you remind all of your listeners about the importance of focusing on your mental health, because we don't want the conversation to advance to something that's far more dramatic. But I'm sure we can even wrap this episode with a reminder for the suicide prevention hotline, where people can go when they absolutely need the help in the moment of crisis. But I think what's so important is we just don't want people to get to that crisis point anymore.
I want to say something. I think one of the things that we have to do, I don't care. Someone's going to have some hurt feelings. So I guess that's just life. I know that one of the challenges I had is that, I'd have conversations with some of our players because there was a perception that some other people in management weren't open to hearing constructive feedback. And I spoke to several players and they all said the same thing about certain management members. And I think one thing we have to do, whether you're in corporate or sports, is that just because, everybody wants to be the king, but then you have to bear the weight of that crown. And I have people that were working with me this past season that weren't willing to bear the weight of that crown. And those conversations keep to myself, but you have to be willing to hear people out. And that's where corporate America and sports are similar. You have people that are, coaches, general managers, CEOs. They think they're God and know everything, and you don't. And they think that their idea, it's there's still a lot of people that have this myopic view that it's their way or the highway. But, I just want to remind everybody, including myself, I think I'm a smart person, and I've proven that. But You have to be able to work with other people. And sometimes what you do doesn't work. And you have to be able to let someone tell you that this is not a good idea. And if you're going to wear that crown, you have to be able to hear accountability. You know, I heard an anecdote after a tough game. I won't say which one, where somebody asked a question and they were told, "How dare you question my authority?" They said it in front of the whole team. And I've had this corroborated with 3 people. So whoever's listened to it, if they don't like I said this, I have it corroborated. I know who said it. I know who said what. And the damage that can leave is quite remarkable, you know. And to tell, and particularly in this situation when it comes to basketball, you have young men that are sacrificing their livelihoods and their bodies. And we can't talk to people like that. In my business, I have people that are sacrificing their livelihoods for me to make money, and to constantly shut them down over, it's not going to fly.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, Eric and Yvonne. As we wrap up this conversation, I think this segue us another topic that we can pick up in the month of September, and that's of where's the line when we talk about that in regards to constructive criticism, because we've become very sensitive now to where many things hurts our mental health. So the line between constructive criticism and affecting someone's mental, and that would be a great topic to pick up in September.
We can definitely do that.
Yeah, because I do think there is a thin line.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm not always good about myself. So
yeah. So we'll make sure we get you back in this chair and we map this thing out.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll bring a doctor or someone who knows exactly where that imaginary line is.
But actually, we don't need a doctor for that one, Drew. If I can say, it's really the spirit of what's referred to as psychological safety. And building a culture of psychological safety. And whether you have that on a sports team, whether you have that in corporate America, but that's basically giving you the freedom to show up as human, bringing all of your humanness to work and doing everything you just described, receiving feedback, giving feedback without penalty.
Yeah.
Without being made to feel othered or anything like that. So I can come back and talk about that one.
Well, there we
Feel
go.
free to bring a doctor.
We should, because,
on other episodes.
Like in the the TBL, I think there are players that won't speak up because they play in that league for the purpose of getting another job. And some of these teams do go back and talk to these coaches, and they're afraid of speaking up because they're afraid of the retaliation behind the scenes. I can tell you firsthand, I know that for a fact.
Well, I think it would be interesting, though, even if you just look, Eric, at the NBA, what are those organizations that are doing it right, where the players do feel safe? They do feel that sense of psychological safety and that freedom to speak up. I wouldn't say it was all of the teams, maybe a few of them.
I think.
Well, Minnesota lets Ant-Man say a lot of things.
Well, we can only point to the recent NBA champions a couple of weeks ago, and that's the Boston Celtics. And one thing that really stood out, listening to a lot of their players in interviews, is the communication that the coach has with the players. And this is something that I thought of incorporating myself, is that they said the coach before every practice takes the time to have an individual conversation with every single player every practice. And so there's no coincidence why they're the champions. So maybe our Houston Rockets can incorporate that and we can see a championship.
Ime's a little bit of a...
He's from the 90s, huh?
Yeah. Well, he learned from Pop.
Yeah. So
that's where he started coaching. He coached under Popovich in 2013.
Yeah.
So...
Well, Yvonne, we really appreciate that.
Yeah,
and as you mentioned, the call of action, September is Suicide Prevention Month. So if anybody out there is like Eric said and Yvonne mentioned, is let's make sure that we jump on top of it before we get to that point. But if you do, the lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK. Again, 1-800-273-8255, or find someone in your local area. But guys, Yvonne, this was fun. Thank you for coming to I'll reach and get you there.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks
We appreciate that.
for getting me out.
And Yvonne, I just wanna
getting
say-
me in front of the
also,
camera.
I just want to personally thank Yvonne for putting up with me because I'm not easy to deal with. Yvonne, in the beginning, she said to spend a lot of time keep me in line on this program. You know, my swearing has come down a lot because of you. Thank you.
It's all good.
That's what she does. So she's the police behind
When she
the
told me
scenes.
that it's costing a lot of money to use the dump button, I got the message.
It's all good. You guys
Yeah,
are doing great work. Keep it up. Thanks, Sports Gumbo.
Yeah. Well, you know where to find us every week on the Sports Gumbo, where we talk about, that's why it's called Sports Gumbo, a variety of topics. Thanks for joining myself, Yvonne Harris, and of course, the main man, Eric Pierre.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week. Peace.